Welcome to Red in April Off-Grid. Join us as we build our off-grid homestead in the Arizona desert. In this episode, we're making our own custom hardwood vanity countertop, leveling and surface grinding the concrete floor in the bathroom, and finally finishing the drywall in the house. We decided that we wanted to make our own vanity top and use hardwood, and so here I'm going through a selection of hardwoods that I've had. I like woodworking, so I've collected hardwoods over the years, and this is some African mahogany that I've had for several years. I've used it on other projects, and I really like this stuff. It's just gorgeous wood. So once the pieces were selected, the first thing I needed to do was to run them through the planer to bring them to the right thickness. So this mahogany was 1 3/8 to 1 1/2 inches thick, and it's only rough finish, so it's very coarse and rough, and it needs to be smoothed out. So what I wanted to do here was to run it through the planer just to where it cleaned up. I want to leave as much thickness as possible and just run it through the planer both sides until I got 90-95% cleanup. Working on the second board here, it takes quite a few passes to clean this up. This is a old planer. It's seen so much use, and the blades aren't real sharp, so I'm really having to take my time with this. It was never a real expensive planer to begin with, but I've actually got an incredible amount of service out of this old thing. It's just an old Craftsman. Each pass I just make a small adjustment and take off just a very little bit. But eventually it gets the job done, and after several passes it's cleaned up on both sides and should be pretty flat. Almost finished here. I run both of the pieces through at the same setting to make sure they're both exactly the same height. And then I cut this longer board to length here. I can get 2 lengths out of this longer board, and then I have that other shorter board that was already cut close to length for the third piece, and that ought to get me pretty close to the width of the countertop. And if I need a little bit more, I may have to add a 4th board. As I cut these to length, I'm leaving myself an extra 1.5 inches. After I glue these up, I want to come back in later and make the final cuts to length and get it really squared up and true. But right now I just need to rough cut them and get them close, or leave myself a little bit extra. For the next step, I'm bringing out my jointer. This is also an older piece of Craftsman equipment. It's very heavy. It's small, but it's very solid. It's like cast iron. Anyway, I lugged it out and put it on top of my little temporary work table. It's basically just a piece of plywood on top of my sawhorses. It makes it nice because right now the shade is on this side of the barn, so I get to work in the shade. And then plus it's outside, so I don't have to worry about dust as much. I don't have to wear a dust mask since I have great ventilation out here. So I would prefer to bring my tools outside and use them outside rather than trying to use them in the shop and making a big mess in there. So anyway, that's why I lug them out. But this next step here is the jointer. And so what this does is squares up the edges and also makes the edges true and straight. And I need them to be perfectly straight and parallel so that I can glue up 3 or 4 pieces and have those joints be really tight and close, not have any gaps in those joints. Earlier you saw that I checked the squareness of my fence. That's real important. I just did that with a good quality triangle square. Made sure that my fence is square to the base, and then start running it through. You have to be careful to make sure that it's pressed firmly against the fence and also pressed firmly against the base so that it stays flat. It's actually kind of tricky, a little bit difficult to do because these edges are not anywhere close to straight. And so sometimes it can be a little challenging to get that curve out of these edges. Sometimes you kind of have to start midway and work it several times. So you can see me running it through several times. Here I'm doing a little test, and you can see there's still some gaps. And so it's not quite right. I need to adjust the base a little bit. I need to take off just a little bit more material on each pass, actually. And so there's actually something a little bit wrong with my base here. I had to mess with it a little bit and got it fixed up where I liked it, and I'm going to have to run everything through at least one more time to make sure that there's no gap in between those seams. Well, that adjustment did the trick. It didn't take long after that to get them true with no gaps, and I was ready for glue up. I decided to go ahead and add a small piece in to get the width right. It was too narrow after all that messing around with cutting them, and I needed to add about 1.5 inches. So I added a board there, and you can see it. The next step was to go ahead and add some pocket screw holes to screw all this together. That's an extra step that I probably don't need to go through since I'm going to be gluing it. But these pocket screws are easy to do, they're invisible from the top, and they just give you that extra bit of security in addition to the glue. And I'm getting started with the glue up. Glue up is 90% preparation. So as you can see, I've got the clamps ready underneath there. I've got some boards that these are sitting up on that'll keep them flat and level. And I've got everything I need to clamp all this together and keep it flat, so that once I get the glue on, it's just a matter of throwing those clamps on and getting it all put together. So I make sure that I take the time and get everything ready. Once it's glued, I screw in those pocket screws. Now it's firmly attached. And then I see that board I just put on. Now I'm clamping 2 boards together to keep it from trying to bow as it dries. And so that keeps it nice and flat as it dries. And then I'm just putting on a ton of clamps to make sure it's all tight as it gets some glue squeezing out on those joints. I always like to see that. Get it all clamped up and tight, and then I'll let it sit for about an hour while it dries. We have actually done a wood countertop before. It was in the bathroom of our last home in Texas. And we really liked it. It wasn't out of mahogany. It was out of a curly hard maple, which was a nice wood too, but we really liked the product. It looked nice, and it actually wore well when you finish them right. It was a very livable surface and beautiful, so that's what we wanted to do in the guest bathroom here in this house. This mahogany we're using is a really beautiful wood. It has a lot of natural chatoyance, which is kind of that cat's eye look. When you look into the grain, it kind of shimmers. It's really cool stuff, just absolutely gorgeous, and so we're excited to use this in the bathroom. I might mention too that the Vanity itself is a couple of the cabinet pieces that we got from our recent cabinet sets, so those are going to work perfect, and that's those 2 pieces I was able to measure, and that's how I know how wide to make this thing. Well, here it is all clamped up to dry. I actually ended up adding more clamps than this, but we don't have a picture of it. I let this dry for about 3 hours. Well, we need to make a trip to the supply store, and we returned the extra insulation we'd bought. We'd bought more than we needed, so it was nice to be able to return that, and then we bought some drywall to finish up the project. We've used 104 sheets in the first order, and we calculated that we needed about 19 more, so we bought those, and now we're bringing them inside and stacking them, getting ready to finish up the drywall, hopefully. We'd like to move on to grinding the concrete in the bathroom, but before we can do that, we have a low spot that we need to fill. So right here at the entrance of the guest bathroom, there's a low spot just right through this door, and there's kind of a long story behind that. It had to do with, we had originally planned on it being an aircrete home, and we purposefully made it about a half an inch lower than it should have been, and of course we regret that now because we have to go back in and fill it. But we're starting on that process now. There is a joint along this opening here where there's a crack, and so April is filling in that crack first so that the surface leveler doesn't sink down into that crack and get out of level. So anyway, she's filling in that crack first, and then she's applying some bonding agents so that the leveler really adheres nicely to the existing concrete. And of course we cleaned all this and really good and everything before we started. We don't know how much we need, so we decided to start off with a half a bag, and using a piece of rebar and then cutting the bag is an easy way to divide the bag pretty close to in half. So that worked pretty good. So we started off with a half bag, just mix it according to the directions, and we'll see how this goes. I might mention here that we plan to grind and seal all of the concrete we have in the house, and that'll be the finished surface. We're not going to put any tile or anything. We're just going to grind it as flat and smooth as we can get it, and then apply several layers of a good sealant to it. We really like the look of finished concrete like that. We think it'll go well with kind of an industrial modern type home, which is the look we're going for. And it's also quite inexpensive and doesn't use a lot of materials. So that's what we're planning, and so that's why we needed to, we're going to try to get this spot as level as we can, and then grind it when we grind the rest of the floors and try to smooth it all in. Now we do know that this leveler isn't technically supposed to be used as a top coat for a floor, but we couldn't think of any other way to do it, and we think it'll be fine, so we'll just hope for the best. And here we are pouring the first bucket out, smoothing it out a little bit. Doesn't look like it's going to be quite enough. We had marked on the floor how far we needed to go. We'd put a level down and made marks on how far we felt like we needed to go to get it fairly level, and it doesn't look like this is going to be enough, so I'll probably do the rest of the bag and make another batch here and see if I can fill it up the rest of the way. Fortunately, it does look like this will be the only place where we need to use a leveler, and the rest of the house, the cement looks pretty good, and I think everywhere else I can grind it and make it work with what we have. You can tell this stuff is setting up really quickly. I can feel the heat coming off of it, that chemical reaction as it dries, so I'm in a bit of a hurry to make this second batch. I want to try to get this second batch on there before the first batch cures too much. So I hurried and made a second batch and poured that on top. April's working to smooth that out. It is setting up really quickly. We've never done this before, so this is our first time trying it. We just kind of did the best we could, and I think it turned out okay. Could have been better. It's not perfectly flat. It was really hard to kind of feather or blend the edges in, but we did the best we could, and hopefully this will work. Well, back to drywall. In our last video, April finished up all the insulation and got everything ready for me, and I just have the master bedroom and bathroom to finish up.
So I'm going out of town for a few days, and Red's going to be here working on the place, so he's hoping to get this drywall finished up. We're in the master bedroom and bathroom area. He's already got the closet drywalled, and he has the first coat of mud on most of the bathroom, but we had to go get some more drywall before he could get this finished up.
Well, I finished hanging the drywall in the master bedroom and bathroom. All the drywall is hung in the entire house now, and I'm just working on the first coat of mud in the master bedroom right here. April has been gone this week, and I didn't get a lot of video of this process. I just got a little bit here and there. It's been a sad week, actually. It's just a bummer when April is gone. We're always together, and it's really strange when she's not here. I definitely have found that I've had a hard time keeping my motivation up to work like I normally do without her here. But I've got by, I've made do, and I've accomplished most of what I had hoped to accomplish while she was gone. I wanted to get this drywall hung, and I wanted to get pretty much as far as I could on this drywall, so I'm making pretty good progress. One thing that came up this week was the evaporative cooler decided to give me fits. The squirrel cage came loose from the shaft, and I didn't realize it until it had been running for a while and started making some noises, and I went over there and felt it, and it wasn't blowing like it should. So anyway, I had to go out and take a look at it, and I had to end up reattaching the squirrel cage to the shaft, and then I ended up making some adjustments to the pulley, making the pulley smaller so it kind of changed the ratio so it wasn't working as hard to push as much air. It's really a little oversized for the house, so I wanted to step it down a little bit so it was each revolution of the motor turned the cage less, and so it moves a little bit less air to kind of fit it properly. But anyway, I had a few other problems. The hose came off of the water pump, and so ended up spending a fair amount of time messing with the evaporative cooler, but hopefully I've got it all set now. I think maybe the problem with the squirrel cage is that when it came from the factory, I thought it was already tightened properly, but it wasn't, and I didn't check it when I installed it. We did get a nice little rain while April was gone, about 3/4 of an inch, and it filled our pond up for the first time this year.
So I just got back from a trip to Albuquerque to visit some family, and Red has made a lot of progress on the drywall. Got the bedroom, the first coat on. He needs to sand it. Here's the bathroom. I think he has the second coat on in here, and the closet.
Well, I'm getting started grinding the bathroom floor, so this will be an interesting experience. I started out with this little 4-inch grinder just to try to get the edges roughed in and to kind of blend, some of the rough spots in and just get ready for the bigger disc grinder. The 7-inch grinder that I'll be using next only goes within about 1 inch of the edge, so the last bit there has to be done by this little 4-inch grinder. This little grinder doesn't have any dust collection. As you can see, it's really dusty in there, and this dust is really bad stuff. So I'm using a really good respirator with P100 filters, and it's on nice and tight. This is really bad stuff to breathe in. So I'm moving on here to my 7-inch grinder. So now that I've got the edges prepped, I'm working with my 7-inch. So this is a 7-inch Makita grinder with a 7-inch diamond disc on it. And this is interesting to use. This is a big, heavy, powerful tool, and it's a pretty big surface area that it contacts. And so this was an interesting experience trying to blend this. Part of that went okay. It was really tough, actually. It was really hard blending in around that leveler that we poured. This leveler didn't level completely, and it left about an 1/8 inch step. It didn't blend seamlessly to the existing concrete. It left a little step, and so I had to blend that, and that was really challenging. And it was slightly bowed in the middle. It wasn't quite totally flat. For leveler, I thought it would be flatter. So anyway, it took quite a bit of blending, which is a real challenge to do with this big of a disc. It's surprisingly difficult. The smaller disc surface you have, the easier it is to blend. But when you have a big flat disc like this, it's really hard to blend any height difference. So that took me a good while. Once I got that done, I moved into the rest of the bathroom floor. And as you can see, it's definitely working. It's taking off the high spots, But what I found pretty quickly is once those high spots come off, it's really difficult to get every last low spot out. I've really had to work it for a long time to try to get out those brush marks or stroke marks you could see from the trowel that was left in the concrete. So the high spots come off quick, but then you really have to work it for a long time to really get it smooth and to get some of those low spots out. Well, with some effort, this is cleaning up reasonably well. I'm actually, fairly happy with how this is going, considering that, we mixed this concrete all ourselves, poured it all ourselves, and we don't have a lot of experience doing it. So we're, rank amateurs here, mixing and pouring our own concrete slab, and it turned out reasonably well. It's definitely not going to be a perfectly smooth grind. I'm not going to be able to get out every low spot, but it looks like it's going to have a nice look and kind of look a little bit rustic, a little industrial, but so far I'm liking it. I think it's going to work out. One thing I'm finding out here is that this is really hard on the knees and the back, especially the back here, because you're down on your knees, and this is a heavy tool that you're moving around with both hands, and so it's just murder on the lower back. We're proud of how this slab turned out, but it's definitely not real flat, and I knew it wasn't perfectly flat, and that's why I opted for the 7-inch grinder instead of the big industrial grinders. I knew that the industrial grinders would not work on the surface. It's just too lumpy, too unlevel, and it literally just wouldn't work. They need a really smooth surface to work properly, and so I needed a smaller tool to be able to follow and blend in the contours of this pad, and it seems to be working out good. I'm sanding the second coat of joint compound in the master bedroom, and for the first time it looks like I may not need to come back in a third time for just touch-ups. It looks like this may actually finish it. I've got a little bit better as I've gone through this entire house and done this. This is officially the last sanding on the last bedroom of the house. This marks the completion of the drywall phase of this project. We ended up using 121 sheets of drywall to complete this, and it took about 5 weeks. I can't tell you how happy I am to be finishing up this part of the process. Thankfully my shoulder survived. It looks good. I'm happy with the way it turns out. It's definitely the best work I've ever done. I think just because I've got some better tools this time and had some previous experience, it's far from perfect, but I'm actually pretty happy with how it turned out. It looks, semi-professional, so it turned out all right, but I'm so ready to be moving on to the next part of the project. Well, with the drywall done, we're moving these cabinets off of the concrete, just putting them on the gravel for now so that we can focus on the next big step in the project, which is to finish grinding all of the concrete floors in the house and get those sealed so that we can then start on painting and cabinet installation and all the other fun stuff, and start on the earthen floor on this gravel side. That'll be so nice to get this gravel covered up. So some exciting stuff coming up.